So zero COVID basically sweeps the world with a few exceptions, right? And these are the policies that are instituted. And you're getting a ton of data coming in from all sorts of places. And presumably you're plugging them into your wellness system. I don't know if you have an AI, working with your parameters or something like this. But so what really happened? What was the cost when you look back now?
Well, the cost was very similar to the cost anticipated and openly predicted in publications right at the start of the pandemic. So, there are dozens of areas in which the costs were, but let me mention 5 big ones, right? One cost, and very obvious we're becoming more aware of, is to children. Right? If you don't have children at school, then their skills are going to deteriorate, particularly if they don't have parents who self-educate their kids with laptops at home. But if they're parents who don't care that much, or they just, are working hard to make ends meet, and all the kids have is the television and the internet, then those kids are not going to accumulate skills, but they're also going to lose social abilities. They're not going to interact with other kids because they're stuck at home and not supposed to be with other kids because that's dangerous. And that's going to cost them emotional development. It is going to cost them social development, social intelligence, and that'll cost them for the rest of their lives, right? And we have, in that sense, scarred a whole generation of kids, and they're not going to get these skills back. This is a done thing now, right? If it were easy to get back, we'd have done our education different. Then, they needed less years of education, right? So we know that we've scarred them for life, a whole generation of American children, of European children, and it's even worse in parts of Africa and Asia, where sometimes schools have been disrupted for almost 2 years. And, some of the girls are never going to come back to school. They've been married off. It's a totally different trajectory that they're now on. So that's one big cost. And we could see that coming because we could see in the very early data already in April 2020, coming out of the anxiety of children, their inability to learn then. Reports were coming out of various educational institutions in mid-2020. Some international organizations were sort of ringing the alarm bells. We knew this in mid-2020. A disaster is happening with the education of our children, particularly in the poor parts of this world, due to the school disruptions, not due to COVID, due to policy, right? Then another disaster that has happened is as it were, the mental health effects of all the lonely people, of the people who cannot, as it were, sit at home and, have a wonderful home environment with 5 others, but who have, let's say, an abusive husband or no one else there, right? And they're not allowed to see their mother and their father in retirement homes because it's been locked away, right? And who hence go demented very quickly and die much quicker, right? And who are not allowed to date, and they can't marry, and they can't travel, right? Well, their lives have been blighted by almost 2 years of social isolation. And we are not a species meant to be alone, We are very much a social animal. We need to be touched. We need to be around people. We need to feel their presence around us, joke, banter, have sex, all kinds of things. That's whom we are. That is how we live. We live with and via other people. And disrupting that has horrible effects on mental health. So, roughly speaking, in the UK, we found that mental health problems almost doubled. Right? So depression rates from 15 to 30%. We find similar things in the US. And that is an enormous loss. Right? So in terms of the quality of life, you should think that the quality of life may be reduced by something like 10% for the population on average. Now you think, 10% is not so much. But think of that. If you take 10% away of the whole population, that's like taking 1 year away of 1 in 10, right? So in 1 million people, you are taking away 100,000 years of life.
We live in an era of censorship and disinformation, and it can be really hard to know what's true and what's false in this information climate. To get honest information and insights you can trust, join us on Epoch TV. You can sign up for your 14-day free trial at ept.ms/freetrialjan. That's ept.ms/freetrialjan.
Well, how much is a COVID death? Is one COVID death 100,000 years of life? I don't think so. Nobody lives that long, right? So on average, a COVID death probably means that we lose 3 years of life. So 100,000 years of life is then the same as almost 30,000 COVID deaths. in terms of equivalence, in terms of quality of life versus length of life, right? And so there's nowhere near 30,000 people dying on a million after just 1 year, right? We're now 2 years in, and we're much more looking at 2,000 to 3,000 per million, right? And so the ballpark figures don't stack up. You know, the loss just in terms of mental health alone, right, far outweighs, you know, in terms of this sort of, you know, accumulator what life is about, even the wildest guesses as to the benefits of these lockdowns in terms of reduced COVID deaths. Then there are other big ticket items on the cost ledger, right? There have, of course, been the businesses, the people forced to stay at home and be unemployed. And that has meant that government debt has racked up. And government debt is very important because it's got to be paid off. And the reality is, as we know from Angus Deaton's book, you know, the Nobel Prize winner in his Deaths of Despair, that if you reduce that, you reduce the welfare in the future, you reduce government education, you reduce healthcare again, you're going to cause a lot more mental health problems and a lot more deaths in the future via less health services, a less glowing economy, than you could possibly have saved this time round. Right? Government debt in that sense is sort of hugely important. And we have numbers on that. Right? So for instance, in the UK, how does UK, as it were, government money get converted into lives? Well, the money is used to buy medicine. Right? And when the UK government buys medicine, they have a rule and thumb in mind. Right? For 1 year of life, they're effectively willing to pay something like £25,000, which is, roughly speaking, let's say $35,000. Right? That's how much the UK government spends to buy 1 year of life, right? $35,000. Well, $35,000 for 1 year of life. So for 3 years of life, we're up to almost a bit over $100,000. That's hence what a COVID death would be equivalent as what they in normal times would be willing to pay for it, right? When we work out how much the UK government's actually paid to maybe avert a COVID deaths, we're into the tens of millions of dollars, right? Whereas normally, they'd only be willing to pay 100,000, right? Just based on the fact that they could buy medicine, which saves other people those same 3 years of life that they're otherwise foregoing, right? And so we're able to basically hence use ballpark numbers to say how important government debt is going to be. And hence we can already now say the disruption that's going to come in the coming decades. Now there is an alternative way that society can pay. It can pay back the government debt, or it can have hyperinflation, right? Which is roughly what we're going through now, right? By so much money printing, we're basically impoverishing everybody via inflation and disrupting the whole economic system. And we've also learned in the past that hyperinflation is in a way even worse, right? It's so disruptive. It's so disruptive to the economy, but also people's social lives, to, as it were, you know, all the investments that have been made in skills, that will cost us even more probably. So one way or another, we're in for a horrid time. And that's entirely due to the government policies of the last 2 years. We didn't need to have that horrible time, but it's coming, and we are living it, right? We are living through huge food price increases, and we pretend it's Ukraine, but the food prices were already up something like 50 to 70% above the low level of 2019. And that was due to supply disruptions. That was due to the COVID restrictions, you know, to the disruption of international trade, to sort of stopping lots of people moving and stopping the agricultural system from performing optimally. That's going to lead to food riots. That is already leading to famines in many parts of the world. And in a way, that's on us too, right? I mean, the effect that we have had on the rest of the world via the trade disruption and the other disruptions is horrendous as well, right? And Sunetra Gupta has sort of written about that very nicely, right?